song about y'all is hip-hop.
For Obama, hip-hop. For Obama, hip-hop. For Obama.
Hip-hop suffers under this kind of bad PR image. And a lot of times, we're doing outreach work with educators. They talk about the difficulty they have getting hip-hop into the classroom because their principals have been watching Bill O'Reilly and other programs that represent just the negative of hip-hop. So if you can talk some about how to get over that, how do we deal with that kind of two sides of hip-hop, but also maybe if you can situate that within a ludicrous controversy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you all?
Right.
I'm going to get to your question for the point that I'd like to kind of say up front, which is, I wrote a book called To the Break of Dawn, which is about hip-hop, and in some ways about my generational connection to hip-hop. And I think that for people like me, I'm 39 years old, but people who are like me, we kind of witnessed the birth of hip-hop, and then its maturation, and then its development into something that we feel intensely ambivalent about in a lot of ways. And so when we were just sitting up here, I said to Tanya that last night while I was watching that incredible speech that Michelle Obama gave, I said to myself, I felt conflicted because I said, hip-hop has no language to really describe Michelle Obama. And then Tanya said, except for
hottest chick in the game.
Right. which somehow does not seem to get at the majesty of intellect, democratic passion that she displayed last night. And so there are a couple of things that I want to say about the potential for this. One thing that we see in terms of Barack Obama is kind of carrying a theme that Tanya pointed out, was this idea that individuals have some stake and have a great deal of say, a great deal of influence in how their society and how their government operates. Now, the thing that's been most interesting about that is a kind of odd paradox, which is he's encountered a good deal of hostility from leadership of the civil rights generation. But what Barack Obama is really doing is returning to the roots of the civil rights movement. When you go back and study what Martin Luther King was talking about, what Students for a Democratic Society was talking about, what people in SNCC were talking about, they were talking about grassroots participatory democracy. The democracy did not belong to the moneyed, to the influential, to the powerful. That democracy at its essence was determined by the masses of people who are most influenced by policies created by their government. Barack Obama comes along at a point some years after the civil rights movement, like hip-hop, had been born, grown up, and then developed into something that we felt intensely ambivalent about. So when we look at people like Vernon Jordan, who began his career in the civil rights movement, we then see him matriculating into your basic garden variety Beltway insider in the African-American version. When we see Jesse Jackson in 2008 talking about giving manual castrations to people, that's not the Jesse Jackson that we saw in 1988, who really, more than anyone else, was responsible for turning black people from the biggest voting bloc in the Democratic Party to the biggest influential group, the biggest group of kind of interest group in the party itself. Jesse was responsible for that. And so when we go down the line, we can go for a person to person to person and see this great ambivalence that we have about the civil rights generation. So on some level, Barack Obama represents a challenge to people to really return to the ideals of their youth and representing an opportunity for us to really move forward with some of those same kinds of perspectives. Now that said, there are inherent risks in anything and everything. I think that the ludicrous incident was a good example of that. I happen to live in Atlanta, and I've had some connections to people who were involved with that project. And I heard the song before it actually got out. And I reached out and said, y'all can't release this song. And the response that I got was kind of that I didn't know what I was talking about. And when it got out and it really blew up, Big Boy from Outkast had a panel that he's been very active in supporting Senator Obama. And when we were kind of discussing things beforehand, he said, well, I don't think that Ludacris did that intentionally. I think he just thought it was going to be a regular mixtape release that people weren't going to notice. And I said, you know, I'm going to give you an analogy that works for a musical person. I said, you know how you have microphones that are extremely sensitive, such that if someone is whispering on the other side of the room, it will pick it up? And if you're in the studio, you have to have absolute silence because that will come out on what you're recording? He said, yeah. I said, same thing with presidential campaigns. If there's something that is a distant echo of a distant echo of a distant echo, it will get picked up, especially in the age of the internet, especially in the age of Twitter and the age of, you know, Facebook. We have a billion different ways to connect people. And so what I think is, hip-hop has that potential to address, to make these mass statements that you have practically the whole world ready to listen to what it is you have to say. But there's also an inherent risk that comes with that. And I think those are the points. You also asked very quickly about how we get past that. I think, truthfully, I have confidence in a lot of work that I've seen people, the hip-hop community, people like yourself and people with the organizations, Hip Hop Summit Action Network, the League of Young Voters. I think that people are making inroads because one of the things that surprised me when I was going around talking about my book was that I got comments from older people who were in education saying, how do we make a connection between these two things? And there are other people who are doing syllabi and curricula that kind of integrate this into it. But I don't think that that's something that's going to be an issue that we're talking about even 5 years from now.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, come stand up. Stretch for the stars, get somebody else involved right next to you. Y'all elected me to keep it so fresh for you.